In February 1944, Allied radio operators picked up a strange message from the French countryside. The signal was weak, filled with static, but one word came through clear. It was a child's nickname, a name that did not appear on any military code list, a name unknown outside the walls of a small Catholic orphanage in eastern France. The man at the radio noted it down, confused. Weeks later, when reports from that village arrived, he realized he had written the name of a child who no longer existed. The orphanage stood on the edge of a ruined town, not far from the German front lines. The war had already broken the land. Fields were empty. Whole families had been deported or killed. The stone buildings of the orphanage, half burned but still standing, were run by 4 nuns of the Sisters of Charity. Inside lived 17 children, boys and girls between the ages of 5 and 12. Their parents were gone, some lost to bombs, some sent to camps, some never spoken of again. Despite hunger and fear, the children kept one ritual alive. Every evening they gathered before a statue of the Virgin Mary in the chapel. The statue was old, carved in wood centuries earlier, its paint faded, its hands worn smooth by prayer. To the villagers, it was a relic of comfort. To the children, it was a mother when they had none. At first, their prayers were simple and normal. The Ave Maria whispered together. But in early February, something changed. Sister Agnes, the head nun, wrote in her diary, "The children pray now in voices not their own. They speak together as if carried by a hidden choir. I hear words that are not Latin, not French, not German. I do not understand them, yet I feel their weight." At night, the sound unsettled the villagers who lived nearby. One farmer said it was like hearing a single voice coming from many mouths. Another claimed the children were answering questions no one had asked. But the most unsettling detail was that the statue itself seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight, as if reflecting more light than was in the room. One child, a girl of 8 named Claudine, kept a broken rosary with beads worn thin. She held it tight during the prayers. Another, a boy named Julian, carved small wooden crosses from scraps of firewood. These little details were remembered later by villagers who testified about the orphanage. They remembered how the children clutched these objects as if expecting something to come. On February 11th, Sister Agnes made a longer diary entry. Tonight, the 17 prayed as one. I no longer hear their own voices. They sound older, deeper, full of echo. When they finished, they looked at me with wide eyes and smiled. I asked what words they used. The youngest boy whispered, "She taught us. The lady taught us." I pressed him to explain, but he only bowed to the statue. Something is happening here. Something beyond me. This diary, hidden in the wall of the convent and discovered during demolition in 1968, is one of the few direct records we have. By mid-February, villagers reported strange sights. A neighbor claimed to see the children standing in the courtyard late at night, barefoot in the snow, heads lifted to the sky, whispering in perfect rhythm. Another said he heard them singing, though the words were unknown. One woman, who risked speaking to Allied forces after the war, described it like this: "They sang as if they belonged to another world, not like children at all, like angels, or perhaps like something that angels fear." The first clear sign that something was deeply wrong came on February 14th. That night, the chapel candles burned down to stubs, yet the Virgin Mary statue still seemed lit. Sister Agnes again wrote in her diary, "The children prayed with eyes closed. When they opened them, they spoke together in a tongue I could not name. They said the lady had promised to take them away from war, away from hunger. They asked me to come with them. My knees shook. I could not answer." What unsettled her most was what followed. After the prayer ended, the children turned to face her, still smiling. 17 pairs of eyes fixed on her. She wrote that their gaze was both innocent and terrifying, as if they already stood on the other side of the world. On February 17th, an Allied scout passing through the region noted graffiti at a nearby railway station. Carved into the wooden benches were phrases in Latin, but later review by linguists showed the grammar was distorted, not truly Latin, not any known form of language. The letters were jagged, as if carved by small hands in haste. The scout described it as words that wanted to be read, but refused to be understood. By now, whispers spread through the village. Some believed the children were being prepared by the Virgin Mary herself for deliverance. Others feared darker forces, suspecting the prayers were no longer Christian, but something else, disguised in holy form. The tension grew. A German patrol passed through the town on February 19th. They questioned the nuns, but left the children alone. Sister Marie, the youngest of the nuns, later said she was sure the soldiers felt something in the chapel. "They entered strong," she wrote, "but left in silence, looking at the ground." The last diary entry from Sister Agnes in part 1 of this story is dated February 20th, 1944. The children no longer ask for food. They no longer weep. They say the lady is calling them. They wait each night for her voice. I hear it too now. Only a whisper, but I hear it. This raises the first haunting question. What voice was guiding the children, and where would it lead them? By the last week of February 1944, the mood in the village had changed. The children at the orphanage no longer played in the yard. They no longer asked visitors for scraps of food or candy, as hungry children often did. Instead, they gathered around the statue of the Virgin Mary every night, waiting for something unseen. Witnesses described the air around the chapel as heavy, like before a storm. The first outside testimony came from a farmer named Henri de la Tour, who lived near the orphanage. He later told investigators that on February 23rd, he woke in the middle of the night and looked out of his window. What he saw left him shaken. The children were outside, all 17 of them. They stood in a circle around the Virgin statue. Their hands were raised. Their lips moved, but I heard no words. Only a hum, like the sound of bees. Then, together, they lifted their heads to the sky. For a moment, I thought I saw light above them, but when I blinked, it was gone. Delatour was not alone. Several villagers reported hearing strange harmonies during those nights, as if a choir sang in the distance. One woman swore she heard the same hymn echoing from the woods, though no children were near her. The graffiti at the railway station also grew more troubling. Allied scouts found more carvings in March, symbols that looked like Latin letters mixed with shapes no scholar could match. The station master, when questioned after the war, remembered seeing small figures at night near the benches. Children, I thought, he said, but they vanished when I called out. Meanwhile, German soldiers grew suspicious. The orphanage stood close to a supply route, and patrols often passed by. On March 3rd, a group of soldiers entered the building to search for hidden partisans. What they found unsettled them. The nuns later testified that the soldiers stood in the chapel for only minutes before leaving without a word. One soldier reportedly crossed himself despite orders forbidding religious gestures. Tension peaked on March 6th. A villager hiding food for the resistance near the orphanage claimed he saw the children walking in two lines, barefoot in the frost. They sang softly, but their words were not French hymns. He described them as sharp and flowing, like water turned into sound. He swore they carried candles that did not flicker in the wind. That same night, Sister Marie, the youngest nun, was taken by German forces. In her interrogation, now preserved in French archives, she was accused of hiding fighters in the orphanage. Her answers only deepened the mystery. She told her captors, "I did not hide them. They walked away themselves, and the Madonna walked with them. She was alive. She moved among them." The transcript notes that the German officer grew angry, calling her words madness. But Sister Marie refused to change her story. When pressed about the children's prayers, she only repeated, "They did not belong to this world any longer." 2 days later, on March 8th, the children were gone. When villagers entered the orphanage at dawn, the beds were empty. Shoes were neatly placed under the frames. Clothing still hung on hooks. Plates of unfinished bread lay on the tables. There was no sign of struggle, no broken doors, no footprints in the snow outside. It was as if 17 children had risen and walked into the air. Sister Agnes's diary ends abruptly. Her last entry, dated March 7th, reads, "Tonight, they say the lady is calling them to..." The page stops there. No ink blot, no torn paper, only silence. Rumors spread quickly. Some villagers whispered the Germans had taken the children in secret, but no records ever showed such a transfer. Others insisted the Virgin Mary had carried them to safety, away from the horrors of war. And some feared darker forces had claimed them under holy disguise. In the months that followed, Allied forces pushed deeper into France. When they finally reached the village that summer, they found the orphanage abandoned. The Virgin Mary statue still stood in the chapel, but it was cracked through the face. Candle wax lay thick at its base. On the wall behind it, someone had scratched 17 small crosses. The official Allied report listed the children as missing, presumed displaced by war. But soldiers who inspected the site added strange notes. One wrote, "The silence in the chapel is wrong. I felt watched, as if the prayers still echoed." Another noted the smell of candle smoke, though the candles had burned to nothing months earlier. Later, villagers claimed that on certain nights in 1945, they still heard the sound of children singing. Always faint, always distant, always in words no one could understand. The story might have ended as a tragic mystery, one among many in wartime Europe, but the files on Sister Marie make sure it did not. When French records were opened decades later, her interrogation notes revealed more than her claim about the Madonna walking. She also described a vision. They told me the lady promised them freedom. They said she would lead them where no soldier could go. I saw it in their eyes. They already belonged to her world, not ours. This testimony, dismissed as madness at the time, became the detail that forced later historians to ask, did the children disappear by human hands or by something far stranger? The disappearance of the 17 children might have been lost in the chaos of war. But in the months that followed, files began to surface that suggested the orphanage case was not forgotten. Instead, it had been sealed. When Allied forces liberated the region later in 1944, they documented destroyed homes, empty villages, and deportations. Yet in one file, marked restricted, there is a single page about the orphanage. It lists the children's names, their ages, and their status. Transferred March 8, 1944. But no destination is given. The line ends in silence. Even stranger, several pages are missing from the file. Only the cover sheet and the transfer list remain. In the margin of the cover sheet, someone wrote in pencil, Sister Agnes, verify testimony. But the testimony itself is gone. In 1963, a retired British officer named Thomas Avery gave a statement to a local journalist. He said that during the summer of 1944, he had been sent to inspect the orphanage with 2 other men. In his words, the place was cold, though it was July. We found the beds empty, the shoes lined up, the crosses carved on the wall. But it was not the emptiness that stayed with me. It was the statue. I swear to God, the Virgin's eyes followed us as we walked. We laughed about it at the time, but none of us slept that night. Avery also claimed that one of his men carried away a small notebook found in the chapel. The notebook was never logged in the official archives. According to Avery, the pages were filled with the handwriting of children, but in no language he could read. The man who took it, a private named Mallory, later suffered violent seizures and died within a year. Whether Avery's account was true cannot be proven, but it fits with other fragments that surfaced later. In 1979, during a renovation of the local church, workers discovered burned papers sealed inside a wall cavity. The papers bore the handwriting of Sister Agnes. Most were unreadable, but one page survived. It read, "The lady stands among them. Her veil shines. She calls them to a place with no hunger and no pain. I cannot follow, but I see the door open in the dark." The handwriting stops suddenly. The bottom of the page is blackened. For years, historians tried to explain the case. Some said the children were taken secretly by German forces. Others argued they were smuggled to safety by resistance fighters. But no camp records, no transport logs, no survivor testimonies ever confirmed their fate. Not a single trace of the 17 was found in any registry of the war. Yet the story did not stay buried. In 1984, French intelligence declassified parts of a wartime investigation into religious anomalies. Among the files was a note dated April 1944 from an officer stationed near the village. It read, "Locals whisper that the orphanage children were lifted away. Some claim to hear their voices in the forest. I did not believe them until last night when I heard singing in the distance. It was not French nor Latin, but it shook me to my bones." This note was filed under Phenomena Unresolved and locked away. In the decades that followed, strange echoes continued. In 1952, a pilgrim reported seeing 17 small figures kneeling before the cracked statue of the Virgin. When he approached, the chapel was empty. In 1968, a soldier visiting the site with his family claimed his daughter began singing in an unknown tongue while touching the base of the statue. And in 1991, a nun from Lyon wrote in her journal that she dreamed of a group of children calling her name, saying they were waiting by the lady. Whether these accounts are visions, inventions, or something else remains unknown. But the effect of the orphanage story is clear. For the villagers who survived, the memory of those children never faded. For researchers, the missing files and burned diaries are proof that someone wanted the truth hidden. The statue still stands today, cracked through the face, its eyes downcast. Visitors leave flowers and candles, though the orphanage around it has collapsed to rubble. Locals say that on some winter nights, when the air is still and the snow falls heavy, you can hear faint voices. 17 voices, praying in words no one living can understand. The question remains, were the children victims of war, erased by violence and bureaucracy? Or were they carried away by something beyond war, something that wore the face of the Virgin Mary to guide them to a place we cannot follow? The truth is sealed inside missing pages, burned diaries, and fading memories. What we know is simple. In March 1944, 17 children prayed before a statue. The next morning, they were gone. No graves, no records, only silence and whispers in the night. This has been a fictional story, told in the style of forgotten archives and lost testimonies. If you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe to our channel and tap the bell.